beloveds, how are you doing today? Hope everything is going great for you. So this series is called Know Your Body. And we've been working, why did it do that? Oh, the white balance, that's why. That's trippy. What a difference. Okay, sorry. Hello. So, the camera was auto white balancing the shot, and it's doing some weird stuff when I hold this up. Anyhow, so today, series is going to be called Know Your Body. Give me a second, I'll get it right eventually. And I'm going to talk to you about the 5 basic body types. Now there are subsets to these body types, and what does this have to do, or how does it pertain to you as an athlete or a performer? Well, I'm going to show you many ways. Not only what you wear will look different on you, let's see, exercises, movements are going to look different on you. So I'm going to cover a lot of different things about know your body type that you may not have heard before. So these are the different body types. As you can see, we have XO. I always start with XO because it reminds me of kisses and hugs. And this is a rectangle, inverted triangle, and the regular triangle. Now, a lot of these are referred to with different names. You might be familiar with this being the hourglass shape, and this apple, round circles, you know. It's pretty self-explanatory. Now, I'm going to go through each one of these, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about these things that you want to keep in mind as a performer and a dancer. And if you're a choreographer, you should also keep these things in mind with your dancers, because you know that not every move that I do, you do, somebody else does is going to look the same, because our bodies are all so different. You can come close and similar, but I have never seen an exact body duplicate, because our bodies are just as unique as our fingerprints and our DNA. So keep that in mind when you choreograph. Keep it in mind as a dancer as well. Don't get frustrated like, what, I'm doing that, why doesn't it look the same? So I'm going to tell you some reasons why it doesn't look the same. And I found it pretty interesting, because I'm also a seamstress. I design clothing, costumes, you know, the whole thing. And I find it very, not only challenging, but fun to do. And I'm going to tell you stories of things that we've done as a dance company and me as a performer and choreographer that I hope will help you. And I'm going to take you through each of these body types, starting with one of my favorite ones. I love the X. I just think it's really cute. And it's really neat to delve into the different things that you can do with this body type. Now, it might not be the most ideal body shape to work with. I personally think that the rectangle is, and I will get to that reason why I believe that when we get to that part. But let's talk about the X, or the hourglass shape. Now, as a designer, let me get that out of the way. As a designer, right away, I know if I have a dancer with this body type, I'm going to have a few hurdles. If we have anything that is secured around the waist, for those of you who do Laban, you might notice some of these symbols might overlap and look familiar. We're not doing Laban right now. We are going to look at this. When you have a small waistline, I have a very small waistline, but I'm kind of, my body type is in between here and here personally. And nobody may be perfectly in any one category. Most often you're going to have overlap like I do. But I do have a very small waist. And the problems we're going to have as a seamstress, at least the things that I found out, is that this, while it looks really, you know, hey, sexy, you know, it's a nightmare to design with if you want the hips to look really slender. So anything that comes here and secures around the waist is going to jut out. Which, you know, okay, a tutu, we can work with that. You know, and a tutu doesn't sit right at the waist, you know, it's a little bit lower, like around here. And that can look very flattering too. But those are also hurdles that you have to overcome as a seamstress, and you have to think about this. So when I'm designing costumes, I'm like, okay, for me, always the problem. I can make inadvertently a very nice chemise look very, you know, boxy and wide at the hips. So I have to be careful when I'm sewing to keep a very nice line here and not to over accentuate the waist, because if I do that, the hips are going to be too big. And I've had other dancers who had like very almost precisely right on this, and if they have a little bit of the regular triangle, then I have another issue to deal with. I would almost prefer that they had the inverted triangle design, because that's easier to overcome a bigger breast line. And I'll get to all those little tricks and things that I do. But as a designer, I keep this in mind, because if I want the costumes to flow a certain way, I don't want them getting caught on the hips. So I'm not going to get into every little thing, but just a little bit here and there, because it's so vast. There's just no way. You can actually just read my book that's coming out when I talk about these kinds of things. Now, as a costumer, I want to always check with my choreographer if I am not the choreographer. Let's just say I am the choreographer, just to keep it very simple for this argument or for this video. And if I'm going to design something, this is just really quick, guys, no critiquing it. Okay, just a simple, right? And the legs are here. Just a very simple, can you see that? We got to get the lighting to work better for these drawings. But a simple little chemise, and it's not tightly fitting except for maybe around the bust line, and it just flows. I've made several of these costumes before. You can look at the contemporary version of the Silent Rose, the one that has the flowers beaded on the top portion. We actually have like a little bralette, and it laces up and back. It's very intricate and very beautiful. And I want to make sure that my choreographer, or me in this case, if I want this to flow a certain way, because if you're doing turns, it'll look gorgeous on any body type. What you have to concern yourself with is when you come out of the turn, how the fabric is going to wrap around the body, and does it get caught on, you guessed it, the hips or the hip line. I always have to look at that. You can look at some of my videos and I'm wearing these things and they get caught on my hip line. So as a choreographer, and most of the time I'm also the costumer, I have to think about, okay, is the movement going to work? And many of my mentors have always said, okay, make sure that you run your piece way in advance with the costuming on to make sure it works. And as I got more familiar with fabric, and I've been working with fabric for decades. I was 7 when I first started sewing and designing clothes. So when I start doing these designs and I'm working with my dancers and the choreography, I have to look at these, how the fabric flows, and I have to look at the choreography. And as a choreographer and as a seamstress, I can keep them both in mind at the same time. Now that's not always the case. Sometimes I'm choreographing for somebody else and I'm given costumes, or sometimes I make only the costumes and I'm not the choreographer, and I don't have the freedom to say, okay, well, let's just try this on in my home, in my living room, not have to go down to the studio and just give it a whirl, quite literally, and see if the fabric falls the way I want it to, coming out of a turn or a leap or, you know, any kind of movement. Penchés, I'm very funny about this, but penchés, I like to have a certain line. Go look at our, I think it's called Snow. The piece is called Snow. And not to be confused with anything from Nutcrackers or anything like that. But look at that piece and you can see a very similar, you know, kind of sundressy chemise type line. And it took a long time to get those just right. Not only did I have to think about the fabric because it's stretched, it wasn't 4-way, it was just 2-way. It was up and down, or I could have chose side to side. I chose side to side because I wanted myself as a dancer and the other dancers that would wear the costume as well, to be able to breathe in it and have it more flexible as it was coming out of the turns, or like a penché, so that way we wouldn't stretch the fabric out, because it would have the give. In a penché you're tipping over, right? And your standing leg stays there, and your body's going like this, and your leg's coming up. So you want the area where the fabric is down here billowing to really have a lot of give. Otherwise you're going to have a lot of problems. Your dancers are either going to have their costume ending up over their head very awkwardly, or it'll get stuck here and ride up, or it will just tear and rip, or they won't be able to get their leg extended as far as they should. So it can be a big nightmare. But you want to know your body type for that. And if you are a dancer, you don't necessarily have to inform your choreographer or your seamstress. They should be experienced enough to see and know your body and say, okay, we're going to have to overcome this. Okay, you're perfect for that. Fine. But as a dancer, you should just know in advance to look for these things when you have the costume on, because your choreographer might not get everything. So it's your job to let your choreographer know, hey, look, I can't do this move with this. When I go and do a grand jeté, it's very un-grand, because the costume, it's either going to rip or it's going to get hiked up over my hips, or whatever the case may be. And like I said, not all costumes will look the same. Go to our website, rubansrouges.com, and on the front page you can see these beautiful violet mauve costumes. They're all identical, and they all looked similar, but they all look different on each of my dancers and myself. We had an elderly woman who had more of the rounder shape, beautiful woman, and then I had the cross, almost rectangular. Like I said, I'm kind of in between. And then we had another dancer who had a different shape. We were all different. And it was very difficult to choose something that would be flattering. And then we had one that had bigger upper part, and I didn't want that to be overwhelming. So we found a very nice design that had a little bit of a cross here and a wrap, so we could have the security here. And then I'm like, okay, we're just going to put slits up the side here, because sometimes what I do is I will buy a fashion. If I have to get permission to do so, I do. But this was, royalty free. Do whatever you want with these costumes. And so we put a slit, and we were able to move and do all the movement. Nothing stayed hiked over our hips. It was perfect. So when you're a dancer, you want to say to your choreographer, hey, you know what, I noticed something. Like I said, I couldn't do my jeté because the fabric got tangled, or it kept me from going as wide as I could. And then the choreographer will tell the seamstress, or sometimes the seamstress will just come up to you because the choreographer gave them permission. Go ahead and fix that. Did you see that? Yeah, go ahead, go do it. Sometimes I do that when I'm not dancing in my pieces that I choreograph. I say, okay, did you see that? Yeah, because sometimes I have a couple of really, really good friends who are really good at designing too, sometimes even better than I am, and they will watch with me the performance, and either we catch it, or I'll catch it and they don't see it, meaning the designer, or vice versa. But sometimes you as a dancer will have to catch it for these people. They're looking at so many people, and while you can have really good skills as a choreographer and as a designer, you might not catch everything. So everybody just help each other out. Now, what if you have an hourglass shape and you really want to work on maybe whittling your hips? Oh my, let me give you an example of exercises that I do, because I'm always having to do that. Now, one of these things that helps me, knowing my body type, my hips, they can, I don't want to say I have a big rear end. I don't. What I do have though is from my waist to the bottom, my sit bone where I sit down, is the widest part of me, the longest part of me. It's great for childbearing, but as a dancer, I have to keep that in mind, because what it does is it keeps me very short-waisted. I have a fairly long torso, meaning when I sit down and from my shoulders and my sit bone, I will look taller than most people who are even taller than me, because it's lengthy from my butt bone to my shoulders, and it makes me very tall. And then I stand up and they say, oh, you're not so tall, because it just looks that way. So I have a lot of length between those two areas, and it keeps me very short-waisted, but I do have a small waist. So that means if I ever put weight on, it's going to show up on me very, very quick and easy because of that. So I've always been very, very thin my whole life, and usually very active, so thankfully, and I watch what I consume. But if you want to slim down your hips and you have the length in your hip bone like I do, those childbearing hips, you can do so many exercises to give that illusion. One of the things is practicing turning out. You can lay on your back on the floor, get a yoga mat, or if you don't care, just lay on the floor and start turning at your rotators in and out, in and out. And that helped me, just doing that, not only strengthening that area, but the turning out and improving my turnout, but I was able to slenderize my hips. And go look online, there's so many exercises you can do. Because what you want to do is create a very nice, long, lean look in that area so it doesn't look boxy. You know what I mean? So what you want to do, and this would also include the regular triangle too. You want to give this a more leaner look and shave a little bit off of here, and so you can give that illusion. You have what you have. I mean, I have bone here. It's not going to get any smaller. I'm already bone to the skin, or skin to the bone, and most dancers are very lean, so there's not much you can do. You have bone structure unless you go and get surgery, which I don't recommend doing, guys. Work with what you got. Don't see it as an imperfection. There is no perfect body type, not in my eyes anyway. You have what you have and you work with it, and some things you can change, and some things you can mask too, with illusion, with proper choreography, etc. Now, as a choreographer, I know darn well when I put certain moves on myself, I have to really elongate because of the blockiness that can come across with the hips. I can hide some of it with costuming, and then I can also lengthen my lines with exercises too. Pilates is great for that. Joseph Pilates, go do that. I had somebody not too long ago actually kind of help me, more than just kinda. So thank you, by the way. It was very helpful. And I highly recommend doing that, because that will lengthen your muscles so you won't have that blockiness. And there are so many exercises too, not just the little one with that I mentioned with turning out all the time. Turn out, turn in, turn out, turn in. It really, really helps. So there's a lot of Pilates things that you do with your legs, and it's pretty amazing. And it will lengthen the look of your line. Now, also as a dancer, the front part is important too, not just width-wise or the side or the back view. The front view, you can hide it easier than the back view. I don't know why that is, but I think because you can have all of this be drawn to the audience's attention. The second you turn around, there's really only one thing you can pay attention to. And so it's a little harder, a little challenging. You can't distract as easy, is what I'm trying to say. So you want to create that very nice, long, lean pan look. And what do I mean by that? Well, the area where the pelvis comes here, and you have your legs, the crease right here. There's this nice flat look here that you want to create with your muscles, and when you turn out, and it's so gorgeous. It especially looks great with jazz pants, black jazz pants. You can really see how much a dancer has trained and has created a body shape by putting on those jazz pants, because sometimes, and they should be a little bit over past the waistline, and they'll be very long, very clean looking, and slight bell at the bottom. Not huge, not 1970s, but just a little tiny flare. and it looks so gorgeous. It is really beautiful. So you want to create that not only with, or keep that in mind with your posture and your movement, but if you have, like I said, this is, I don't know who said that having an hourglass shape is like the perfect thing. It's probably the most challenging that I've found, and it's very, very difficult to costume. That's my opinion. What I found is very hard. I mean, yeah, it looks great if you want to, TNA and all that stuff, but oh my gosh, I have such a hard time finding clothes that fit me right. And plus I'm tiny, so it's another challenge. Anyway, but you want to create that flat pan look in the front, and while you're doing that too, people who have that X shape, what I have to keep in mind too is that even though you're getting flatter this way, you have to pay attention to how your bones and your bone structure is, because I find that the flatter I get, and it looks gorgeous and I love it, but I'm not paying as much attention to the side, and sometimes it can pooch. Like you can lean over, and if you're leaning over and you're not really going concave and you're just leaning over, all of that will fall out in a sense. So you got to keep that in mind too, and a way to avoid that is to really know how to scoop. And this is something that I learned through yoga, and my yoga, well, yeah, I can call that person a yoga master because they are now. You need to know how to scoop it in up. And it's not really in like holding your breath, it's just up. And then when you bend over, you want to keep that like that so it doesn't spill out. And I find that with my body type, it's harder to hide that. In other words, I really have to do that in order to not let that be seen, especially a profile view of that. It's really, yeah, not too fun. But I know that because I have some pictures that people will never ever see. It's like, yeah, well, that looked pretty bad. And you learn your lesson. Anyway, so that's with the hourglass or the X shape. Let's see, I talked about what now? I did the costuming. I just want to make sure I cover a little bit. Like I said, this isn't comprehensive. You want it comprehensive, you have to read my book. Exercise, just a little bit, right? Choreography, I basically said to, for myself, I have to just be careful with a lot of everything. I need to elongate to make it not, so the eyes don't get stuck on the hips and say, oh man, she's got them childbearing hips. So it's really awkward. But, and then as a dancer, especially when I do ballet, I don't want my prominent boobs. They're tiny, but they're still, it's an hourglass. They're there. They're noticeable. And when I do ballet, I don't necessarily want that seen because from the side, it doesn't look good. You see, the idea of ballet is you just want to look like a stick, basically. I'm not being derogatory, but I'm just cutting to the chase here. And a prominent bosom, even though mine are small, for my size, it's still too much. And my rear, so I have to be careful in thinking about how to balance it and make it look good. Okay, and then plus I have I had breast cancer, and my right side is much smaller than my left, and I've been learning dietary things to help just the fat distribution in my body a little bit, and it covers for it, but unless I got surgery and I don't want to, it's always going to be an issue for me, but whatever, I'm just glad I'm alive. Oh, and so that's another thing. You are not forced to tell anybody anything that you don't want to. With costuming, sometimes I've had to tell people, look, my right side's smaller, and it's very awkward. It's awkward for them to hear, especially if it's the opposite sex. How do you talk about this kind of stuff? You have to be very careful, ginger, and I've never had a problem. I've always had people say, oh, don't worry about it, wear your own bra, we'll just do this, but I like to give a heads up warning with that. So if you're one of my dancers, you don't have to tell me everything. But if you want to, I'll listen to you. It's not a problem. I just want to know what you feel comfortable in and how to make you look as beautiful as you are and make your lines look as good as I'm intending them to when you do the choreography. So, yeah. So I always mention that, and I know right away what I need to do. I want to talk a little bit more about choreography for this body type, though, real quick, since it's something that I either love or hate or dread, depending on what I'm doing. The one thing that I have to always remember too, and this will help you guys too as dancers, when I'm choreographing, there are certain moves that I won't put on myself because of my body type. And one of them, I don't even know what it's called per se, but it's where, and I can't really, oh, you know what, I'm going to put a link, or have my people put a link below about the movement I'm talking about, because I don't have enough room right now to demonstrate it. And it, like I said, it won't look good on me anyway. But I have to be careful in doing it or not to do it the way you're supposed to, or to find some kind of end around it, because what ends up happening is just a big butt in your face, and that's not intended. And I do it. I just have to be careful with, I guess, angle is what I want to say. But I don't do the full thing like what a lot of people do. Basically, though, how can I explain it? You put your hands on the ground, it's an inversion, and you twist and you turn, and you have to be careful, at least I do, especially with this body type, and probably the triangle or the apple shape, because all you're going to see is butt. How else do you put this? And you have to be able to turn around and flip around on your landing in such a way that A, you're facing the right direction in which your choreographer wants you to, and B, that you don't put a big butt in somebody's face in the audience. So, you know, when I'm going to do that, I do a variation of it, and it looks good on any body type, so. But it doesn't look good on me to do it the full blown out way, you know. So I'll put a link on the bottom, somebody who has a different body type and it looks good on them. So you want to keep that in mind. Let's go on to the next one. So it's a circle. And I have, as you know, an elderly dancer, and she's beautiful. I love her. I'm so glad she's with us. And she does most of what we do, or at least it's a version of what we do, and she executes it perfectly for her body type. I always have to be careful when I'm costuming for anybody that has a circle shape. I have to be careful with the choreography, but not as much as you would think. Here's why. Because somebody with this shape, when they move, it can be very impactful. I think that's a good word to say. And that's usually a good thing. But what I have to make sure of is that it doesn't overpower the other dancers that might be next to them or in a line. So a way around that is I usually would have anyone with that body type do completely different movements. So they purposefully stand out because they're standing out anyway. Does that make sense? And I want to keep that in mind, and I don't want anyone to feel bad about their movements or compare themselves to anybody else. So I really have to focus on that. And I also, with the costume, it's not so hard to do costuming. You would think it might be challenging, but I've never had a problem with it, and I think I know why. Let me show you something about this. So, you know, round does not, round does not mean overweight, obese, or anything. Please don't misunderstand. But what it does mean is that you just don't have a waistline, is what it is. And it just starts getting tapered off here, right around here, and then right below the hips. Okay? And I've had very petite people in stature have this as something to overcome. So then if they're going to use this kind of costuming, and I'm like, what do we do with that? How do we make it look right on them? And I already told you what I do for movement. So what I do, and I'm going to draw it.